It is July 15th, 3 p.m. in Phoenix, Arizona, and the outside temperature is 122 degrees Fahrenheit. You are sitting in your living room, enjoying the cool 72-degree breeze from the vent above your head. Suddenly, the hum of the compressor outside shudders, makes a violent grinding noise, and goes silent. You check the thermostat. The screen is blank. The fan has stopped spinning. You walk to the window and see your neighbors stepping out onto their porches, looking confused and sweating. This is not a broken fuse. This is the thermal overload, a total collapse of the grid's ability to power cooling systems. In this simulation, we explore what happens when the technology that makes the hottest places on Earth habitable simply fails. We assume heat is just an annoyance, but at 120 degrees, heat is a physical predator that cooks you from the inside. To understand the danger, you have to realize that humans are essentially water-cooled engines. We survive by sweating. The evaporation cools our skin. But this mechanism has a hard limit called the wet bulb. Let's enter this collapse through the eyes of James, a veteran HVAC technician who has spent 20 years fixing AC units. His phone begins to ring uncontrollably. 500 calls in 1 minute, all desperate people begging for help. James looks at his diagnostic tablet and sees that the grid voltage has dropped too low to start the heavy compressors. The power company has initiated a load-shedding protocol that specifically cuts power to residential HVAC units to save the core network. By 5 p.m., the temperature inside your house begins to climb rapidly, turning your modern home into a greenhouse. Modern houses are sealed tight for efficiency. Without AC, they trap heat inside, becoming hotter than the air outside. You open the windows, but the air that rushes in feels like the blast from an open oven door. The asphalt streets and concrete buildings have absorbed heat all day. Now they act like thermal batteries, radiating it back at you. By day 1, the nighttime terror begins, because the city never cools down below 100 degrees, even at 3 a.m. Sleep becomes impossible. You lie on top of your sheets, sweating, your heart rate elevated as your body fights to cool down. James is driving his van, but the engine overheats and dies. Cars are not designed to idle in 125-degree traffic without airflow. He sees people sleeping on their lawns, trying to escape their stifling bedrooms, but the ground is full of fire ants and scorpions. By day 3, the silent wave of mortality hits the most vulnerable demographic, the elderly living alone. Heat stroke is not dramatic like a heart attack. It is a slow confusion. You get tired, you sit down, and you simply never wake up. Paramedics are overwhelmed, but they can't help because the ambulances are turning into ovens themselves. Hospitals initiate Code Orange. Their chillers have failed, and the operating rooms are now too hot for safe surgery. You try to go to the grocery store to buy ice, but the ice melted hours ago, leaving puddles on the floor. The frozen food aisle is a disaster zone. Pizza and ice cream are turning into a lukewarm sludge. By day 5, the wet bulb event strikes the Mississippi Valley and the humid South. In Phoenix, it is dry heat. In New Orleans, it is humid heat. High humidity means sweat cannot evaporate. If the wet bulb temperature hits 95 degrees Fahrenheit, a healthy human sitting in the shade with water will die in 6 hours. Your body simply cannot shed the heat. You boil in your own skin. This is a biological limit that cannot be negotiated. James watches as the climate refugees begin to pack their cars, heading north towards Flagstaff and Colorado. But the highways are gridlocked with thousands of cars that are overheating and breaking down in the sun. The road becomes a graveyard of vehicles. People are abandoning their cars and walking, collapsing on the burning asphalt. The pavement temperature hits 160 degrees. If you fall, you suffer second-degree burns instantly. By day 7, the infrastructure of the city begins to physically warp and fail under the thermal stress. Railroad tracks buckle, twisting into useless steel snakes, derailing supply trains carrying water. Airplane runways melt and become soft, grounding all flights out of the heat zone. You are trapped. You cannot fly, you cannot drive, and you cannot walk more than a mile without risking death. James retreats to his basement, the only place where the temperature is survivable, digging a cooling pit. He wraps himself in wet towels, creating an evaporative cooler, using a battery-operated fan. This is the return of low-tech survival. We forgot how our ancestors lived in deserts without Freon. They built thick adobe walls, small windows, and wind towers. We built glass boxes that require constant energy. By day 14, the water crisis compounds the heat crisis, creating a lethal feedback loop. People are drinking 3 gallons of water a day to survive, draining the municipal reservoirs at triple the normal rate. The pumps that move water require cooling. When they overheat and fail, the taps go dry. Now you are hot and thirsty. This is the psychological breaking point for the population. Riots break out, not for TVs, but for access to swimming pools and shaded fountains. People break into hotels and corporate headquarters, occupying the lobbies that still have backup generator cooling. The cooling centers established by the government become overcrowded petri dishes of disease and violence. Armed guards stand at the doors of the few functioning cinemas, charging $100 for 2 hours of cool air. By month 1, the great abandonment of the Sun Belt is in full effect. Phoenix, Las Vegas, Dubai, and Miami begin to empty out, becoming modern ghost towns. Real estate values crash to zero. $1 million mansion in Scottsdale is worthless if you can't live in it. The economy of the southern United States collapses, shifting the center of power back to the Great Lakes and the Northeast. James decides to leave. He joins a night caravan, traveling only between midnight and 4 a.m. to avoid the sun. They move like nomads, hiding in caves and underpasses during the day, sleeping through the lethal heat. By month 3, the agricultural sector in the heat zones is completely destroyed. Crops wither in the fields. Livestock die by the millions because barns are not air-conditioned. The price of beef and dairy skyrockets as the herds in Texas and California are wiped out. We realized that our food supply was also dependent on climate control technologies we took for granted. By month 6, the world has divided into habitable zones and no-go zones based on latitude. Canada, Scandinavia, and Russia become the new superpowers of the habitable world. Migration borders are closed. Northern countries build walls to keep out the billions of heat refugees from the equator. The geopolitical map is redrawn not by war, but by the thermometer. James settles in a small town in Oregon. He works as a passive cooling architect. He teaches people how to build houses that breathe, using the stack effect to pull hot air out without electricity. We relearn the physics of shade, orientation, and thermal mass. We stop building glass skyscrapers and start building earth-sheltered dugouts and white-painted stone houses. By year 1, the AC addiction is broken, but the withdrawal was painful and deadly. The survivors have a different physiology. They are thinner, slower, and more adapted to the heat. The culture changes. The siesta becomes global law. No one works between 12 p.m. and 4 p.m. Society slows down. The frantic pace of the 21st century was fueled by artificial cooling. Without it, we must rest. The power grid is slowly rebuilt, but AC units are now heavily regulated and rationed. You are allowed to cool one room in your house to 78 degrees, no lower. The days of 68-degree offices are gone forever. James looks at an old thermostat on his wall, a relic of a time when we thought we could control the sun. He keeps it set to off, a reminder that comfort is not a right, but a fragile privilege, the heat. Death simulation proved that we built our civilization in places where nature did not want us. We used technology to defy geography, and when the technology failed, geography took its revenge. So, look at the vent in your ceiling right now. Feel the cold air hitting your skin. Imagine if that air stopped. Imagine if it didn't come back for a month. Do you know which room in your house is the coolest naturally? Do you have heavy curtains to block the sun? Do you have a plan for when your home turns into a solar oven? The sun is the most powerful engine in the solar system, and we are trying to fight it with a plastic fan. Make sure you have a backup plan, because the mercury is rising and the grid is tired.